Smug alien laughter echoed through the Galactic Council chamber as the Suliban ambassador Cade gloated over the destruction of the Zygarian homeworld. The remaining council races, too spineless and feeble to dare challenge the Suliban conquest, except for the humans who boldly stood to intervene, shocking the entire galaxy. Carl Thompson, Earth's young yet intrepid diplomat on his very first day, had arrived at the Council HQ only to learn of the ruthless Suliban attack on the peaceful Zygarians. As the desperate pleas for aid from the burning Zygarian cities fell on deaf ears, the other races quivering in fear of Suliban military might, Carl boldly declared that Earth would send help, even as humanity was still the newcomer, still perceived as weak and technologically inferior by the galactic community. But Carl was undeterred. He quickly mustered a small volunteer force of human soldiers and pilots. Leading them personally, they set out for the Zygarian capital, only to arrive to a scene of utter devastation. The once gleaming city in flames, rubble-strewn streets filling with Zygarian corpses as the Suliban warships rained down destruction from orbit. Yet against all odds, with no concern for their own safety, the human forces leapt into action. Braving the bombardment, they hastily established a defensive perimeter, Carl himself rushing into the collapsing buildings to pull out injured Zygarian civilians. Through exceptional courage, clever tactics, and sheer force of will, the small human contingent managed to evacuate thousands to underground shelters. The arrogant Keed, flabbergasted and enraged by this brazen defiance from the upstart humans, immediately ordered an overwhelming ground assault to swiftly crush them into paste. Hundreds of Suliban soldiers and war machines swarmed the ravaged city center, confident of an easy slaughter. But they were not prepared for Carl and his band of human defenders. Amidst the smoke and blood and chaos, Carl rallied the remaining Zygarian resistance fighters. Armed with only basic kinetic weapons and crude explosives, they met the Suliban force with unconventional guerrilla tactics and a ferocious tenacity none had ever seen before. The battle was fierce and brutal, humans and Zygarians fighting shoulder to shoulder, tooth and nail, making the Suliban pay for every inch of ground with heavy losses. As the intense urban warfare escalated and the daunting odds stacked higher with each passing hour, it became clear this was no mere skirmish. This was a pivotal stand that would decide the fate not just of the Zygarian race, but the future of the entire galaxy. Carl knew if the Suliban triumphed here and now, they would rampage unchecked across countless helpless worlds, enslaving and slaughtering billions. The survival of every free planet now rested squarely on the shoulders of this ragtag human volunteer force, fighting desperately for a home that was not their own against a ruthless enemy who outnumbered them 100-1. Bloodied, weary, but unyielding, Carl and his soldiers dug in deeper amidst the ruined buildings and mounting Zygarian corpses, preparing for a long and grueling defense. The Suliban commanders, unused to such impudent resistance, flew into a rage at their mounting casualties. Determined to make an example of these insignificant humans who dared defy them, they unleashed the full, unrestrained force of their mighty war machine upon the crumbling city center. The firestorm of the renewed assault shook the planet to its core. And so began the pivotal Battle of Zygeria, the furious clash that would shape the future of the galaxy, with only a handful of brave human volunteers standing alone against the Suliban juggernaut. The odds of victory were near impossible. But when have mere odds ever stopped humanity? The relentless Suliban onslaught battered the ruined cityscape, waves of warriors and war machines crashing against the thin lines of human and Zygarian defenders. Carl Thompson fought shoulder to shoulder with his weary volunteers, rallying them with shouts of encouragement as they poured fire into the advancing hordes. Spent ammo clips clattered to the rubble-strewn streets. Keed himself led the charge, his eyes burning with rage as he sought to personally crush this impudent resistance. "Today we end this farce," he roared, storming forward with his elite shock troops. But even as the Suliban closed in for the kill, Carl hatched a bold strategy. "Cover me," he told his second, a grizzled Zygarian veteran. "I'm going to try something crazy." Slipping away in the chaos, Carl sprinted and leapt, snagging onto a low-flying Suliban transport. Clambering aboard, he overpowered the pilot and veered the ship skyward, rocketing towards the looming command dreadnought in orbit. Aboard the dreadnought bridge, Suliban technicians scrambled in shock as Carl burst in, belting lead. He fought his way to a console, frantically scanning the databanks. That's when he found it. Schematics for a devastating new weapon, one that could vaporize entire cities at a stroke. The Suliban had been secretly developing it, an ace up their sleeve. Heart pounding, Carl downloaded the intel onto a data chip. Then he sprinted for the hangar deck, snagging a fighter even as alarms blared and troops closed in. He hit the thrusters and roared out of the bay, whipping back down towards the embattled surface. But as he neared the shattered city center, Carl's heart sank. In his absence, the Suliban had broken through the defenses, now poised to overrun the last Zygarian stronghold. Time was running out. Leaping from the stolen fighter, Carl hit the ground running, barking orders. "We can't hold them," said his Zygarian second grimly, nursing a blaster wound. "There's too many." Carl gritted his teeth. "We don't need to hold them. We need to make their life hell." He pulled the man close. "Here's what we're going to do." Night fell, cloaking the ravaged cityscape in shadows. Under this cover, Carl led a hand-picked squad of human and Zygarian fighters, slipping through rubble and ruin, unseen. Their target, the primary Suliban supply depot on the city outskirts. They planted explosives with desperate speed, rigging fuel cells and ammo dumps. Then they faded back into the darkness and hit the detonators. The depot erupted in a titanic fireball, the shockwave shattering windows for miles. Kide whirled with a roar of outrage as the flames lit the horizon. A crippling blow, the Suliban advanced stumbling as supplies ran dry. And in that pivotal moment, the Zygarian civilians saw their chance. A ragged flood of survivors streamed out of hiding, dashing for the makeshift shuttles even as the Suliban lines fell into disarray. Cade howled with rage. "Burn it!" he screamed. "Burn it all!" And the dreadnought opened fire, a ruthless bombardment reducing the once proud city to ruin. Amidst the chaos and carnage, Carl and his team scrambled to hold the line, fighting through hell to buy time for the evacuees. They fell back step by blood-bought step, every second a civilian clambering aboard a shuttle. At last, the final transport lifted off in a roar of engines, rising above the smoke and flame. Carl and the last ragged survivors sprinted aboard, even as the city crumbled to ash around them. From orbit, they watched their battleground, their crucible, vanish in a storm of fire. The Zygarian capital, reduced to ruin and memory. 1,000,000 lives saved, 1,000,000 lives lost. And yet, amidst the grief and the loss, a spark caught and held. The humans had done the impossible. They had snatched life from the jaws of death, hope from the abyss, and the galaxy paid heed. News spread like wildfire of the heroic stand, the valiant volunteers, the indomitable spirit in the face of annihilation. A cowed and broken galaxy found its voice, its will, rising up in defiance of their would-be conquerors. For Cade and the Suliban, it tasted of ashes, of humiliation. The furious ambassador watched from his battered dreadnought as the human ship limped for home, and he trembled with rage and hate. This insult could not stand. There would be a reckoning. Earth would pay. But for now, a weary Carl Thompson and his band of heroes flew home in silence, nursing wounds and honoring fallen comrades. The battle was won, but the war loomed, long and bitter. They had shone a light against the dark, and the galaxy rallied to it. The future was uncertain, but this they knew. When the hour was darkest, humanity would stand, unbowed, unbroken. At any expense. Carl Thompson stood at the viewport of the shuttle, watching Earth grow larger as they approached. The blue-green orb of his homeworld filled him with a mix of pride and trepidation. They'd saved countless Zygarian lives, but at what cost? As they entered the atmosphere, crowds gathered to welcome the returning heroes. Cheers erupted as Carl and his team disembarked. Hands reached out to touch them, voices shouting thanks and praise. Carl forced a smile, but his mind was already racing ahead to the challenges that lay before them. The celebrations were cut brutally short. Alarms blared across the city. The sky darkened as massive Suliban warships dropped out of warp, their weapons already charging. "Everyone to the shelters!" Carl shouted, sprinting toward the nearest military command center. But it was too late. Beams of searing energy lanced down from the Suliban ships. Where they struck, entire city blocks vanished in blinding flashes. The ground shook, buildings toppled, screams filled the air as panicked civilians ran for cover. Carl fought his way through the chaos to the command bunker. Inside, grim-faced officers huddled around tactical displays, watching helplessly as more Earth cities winked out of existence. "Status report!" Carl barked. "Our orbital defenses are offline," a lieutenant replied, voice shaking. "We never saw them coming. Half our major population centers are already gone." Carl's fists clenched. This was Kaid's revenge, swift and merciless. Days later, as the dust settled on the devastated planet, Earth's surviving leaders gathered. Carl stood before them, his uniform still caked with ash and blood. "We can't let this stand," he said, his voice low but intense. "We have to take the fight to them, hit them where it hurts." Murmurs of dissent rippled through the room. "With what?" an admiral demanded. "Our fleet is in shambles." "Give me your best ships," Carl countered. "A small force, something we can slip past their defenses. We'll go right for the heart of their empire." Arguments raged for hours, but in the end, Carl's reputation won out. They gave him command of Earth's most advanced stealth frigates, crewed by hardened veterans of the Zagarian campaign. As Carl's tiny fleet prepared to depart, a transmission came through from the Galactic Council. To his shock, they offered support, covert assistance from elite alien operatives. Carl watched as sleek shuttles docked with his flagship, disgorging a motley assortment of alien warriors and spies. A towering reptilian with natural armor plating, a lithe, six-armed creature that moved like liquid, a hovering mass of crystalline shards that sparkled with alien intelligence. "Welcome aboard," Carl said, eyeing his new allies warily. "Let's go make the Suliban regret the day they heard of Earth." They slipped away under cover of darkness, vanishing into the depths of space. Carl stood on the bridge, staring at the vast starfield ahead. "Plot a course for Suliban space," he ordered, "and may whatever gods are out there have mercy on our souls." Carl's ship touched down on Earth amid a frenzy of activity. As the airlock hissed open, he stepped out, clutching the hard-won prize, data chips containing schematics for the Suliban's city destroyer weapon. A crowd of anxious officials swarmed forward, hands outstretched. "Get these to R&D immediately," Carl ordered, passing off the chips. "Every second counts." For days, Earth's top minds pored over the stolen plans. Carl paced the halls outside the labs, snatching fitful moments of sleep when exhaustion overtook him. Finally, after a week of feverish work, the chief engineer emerged with bags under his eyes and a glimmer of hope. "We've cracked it," she said. "An electromagnetic pulse delivered right to the core. It'll fry every system they've got." But celebration was cut short as alarms blared. On view screens throughout the base, a swarm of Suliban warships dropped out of hyperspace. "Looks like Cade's not taking this lying down," Carl muttered. As Earth's meager defenses scrambled to meet the threat, Carl gathered his team. Humans stood shoulder to shoulder with alien allies, the crystalline thorax hovering silently, the six-armed Shinta checking weapon systems, the armored Cronin flexing scaled muscles. "One shot," Carl told them. "We deliver this pulse. We might just save Earth. Fail, and there won't be a planet left to come home to." They lifted off in a stealth shuttle, weaving through the chaos of battle. Laser fire and explosions lit up the sky as Earth's defenders fought desperately against overwhelming odds. Carl's shuttle slipped past the Suliban blockade, aiming for the monstrous flagship at the fleet's heart. They latched onto an airlock, cutting through with plasma torches. The team poured into the ship's corridors, meeting heavy resistance. Suliban troops fell before the strike team's advance, but losses mounted on both sides. Carl watched a Cronin warrior fall, riddled with plasma bolts. The Shinta's extra arms proved lethal in close combat, but even she couldn't dodge every shot. Waves of defenders pushed them back. Carl and his dwindling team found themselves pinned down in a side corridor, Suliban fire keeping them from advancing. "We're out of time," Carl shouted over the din. "I'll draw their fire. The rest of you, get that pulse to the core." Before anyone could object, he charged out, guns blazing. The Suliban turned to face this new threat, giving the others the opening they needed. Carl ducked and weaved, taking hits that scorched his armor. He fell back, leading the Suliban on a wild chase through the ship's passages. Pain lanced through his side where a bolt had found a weak spot, but he gritted his teeth and pressed on. Just when it seemed he'd run out of luck, the ship rocked violently. Through the viewports, Carl saw a massive Allied fleet dropping out of hyperspace, ships of a dozen alien designs joining Earth's battered forces. He allowed himself a grim smile. Maybe they had a chance after all. Alarms blared throughout the Suliban ship. Carl fought his way back towards the core, praying he wasn't too late. He rounded a corner to find Cade himself. The Suliban leader's face twisted with rage as he directed a squad of elite troops. Time seemed to slow. Carl raised his weapon. Cade's eyes locked onto him. Both fingers tightened on triggers. Then a wave of energy pulsed through the ship. Systems sparked and died. Lights flickered out. In the sudden darkness, Carl heard the sound of Suliban weapons clattering uselessly to the deck. The electromagnetic pulse had worked. Earth, against all challenges, had won the day. As Allied ships moved in to mop up the directionless Suliban fleet, Carl sagged against a wall. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but humanity had proven itself a force to be reckoned with. The galaxy would never be the same. The roar of engines filled the air as Carl's ship touched down on Earth. He stepped out onto familiar soil, the weight of recent events heavy on his shoulders. A sea of faces greeted him, cheers erupting from the crowd. "Thompson! Thompson!" The chant swelled as Carl made his way through the throng. Hands reached out to touch him, to shake his hand, to thank him. He nodded, forcing a smile, but his mind raced with the challenges ahead. At the podium, the President of Earth clasped Carl's hand. "You've saved us all," she said, her voice carrying across the square. "Humanity owes you a debt we can never repay." Carl leaned in close. "Ma'am, we're not out of the woods yet. We need to talk, in private." Hours later, in a secure briefing room deep beneath the White House, Carl laid out the intercepted intelligence. "Cade's rebuilding," he said, pointing to grainy images of Suliban shipyards. "And worse, he's salvaged research on the city destroyer." The room fell silent. General Hawkins, a grizzled veteran of Earth's defense forces, spoke first. "So what's our move, Thompson? You've got more combat experience against these bastards than anyone." Carl paced the room, considering. "We hit them hard, but we didn't break them. A full-scale assault on their homeworld could push Cade to use the city destroyer if he's got it operational." "Then what do you suggest?" the President asked. Carl's eyes gleamed with a dangerous light. "We go in quiet. A small team, our best operatives. We find their research facilities, destroy them, and take out Cade." The Galactic Council convened days later. Carl stood before the assembled alien delegates outlining his plan. Murmurs of dissent rippled through the chamber. The Arcturian ambassador, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline shell, spoke. "This plan is madness. We should crush the Suliban now, while they're weak." Carl shook his head. "And risk them unleashing weapons we can't counter? No. We do this smart, we do it quiet." After hours of debate, the council agreed. Carl wasted no time assembling his team. In the hangar bay of Earth's newest carrier, he addressed the motley crew of humans and aliens. "Each of you was chosen for your unique skills," Carl said, his voice echoing off the metal walls. "We're going into the heart of Suliban territory. It'll be dangerous, but it's our best shot at ending this war." A Zagarian fighter stepped forward, eyes burning with barely contained rage. "We'll make them pay for what they did to our world," he snarled. Carl nodded. "We will, but we do this right. No unnecessary risks." As the massive Allied fleet jumped to hyperspace, Carl's smaller, stealthier ship slipped away unnoticed. They emerged from faster-than-light travel deep in Suliban space, immediately going dark to avoid detection. "First target," Carl whispered, pointing to a holographic display. "Research facility on Suliba Prime's third moon. We go in fast. We go in hard." The team moved with precision, breaching the facility's outer defenses with practiced ease. Inside, they fought their way through surprised Suliban guards, neutralizing resistance with ruthless efficiency. In the main lab, Carl's eyes widened at the sight of half-finished prototypes and data screens filled with schematics. "Rig it all to blow," he ordered. "Leave nothing intact." As they extracted, explosions rocked the facility. Carl watched from their cloaked ship as the research center erupted in a ball of fire. One down, but their most dangerous task still lay ahead. The Suliban capital loomed before them, a sprawling metropolis protected by energy shields and orbital defenses. Carl turned to his team, faces set with fierce. Carl surveyed the sprawling cityscape of the Suliban capital from his office window. The once imposing skyline now bore the scars of conflict, with scaffolding and construction drones swarming over damaged buildings. He turned back to the diverse group seated around the conference table. "Reports from the outer colonies aren't good," Carl said, tapping a holographic display. "Another refinery hit last night. 17 dead, 40 injured." Zara, his Arcturian advisor, flickered with concern. "The Loyalists are growing bolder. We must take action." "And risk alienating the populace further?" countered Grix, a grizzled Cronin veteran. "Every crackdown fuels their propaganda." Carl rubbed his temples, fatigue etched on his face. "We need to give the people something to believe in, not just more security measures." He activated another display, showing plans for repurposing Suliban military facilities. "We start here, convert the shipyards to civilian use, get people working, rebuilding their own future." As the council debated logistics, an aide burst in. "Sir, urgent message from Earth." Carl excused himself, stepping into a secure comm booth. The stern face of Admiral Chen materialized. "Thompson, we need you back home. The diplomatic situation is spiraling out of control." "I can't just abandon my post here," Carl protested. Chen's expression hardened. "The Rigelians are threatening to pull out of the coalition unless we grant them exclusive mining rights in the Suliban sector. The Andorians are demanding we share shield technology. It's a powder keg." Carl's mind raced, weighing his responsibilities. "Give me 48 hours to stabilize things here. I'll be on the next transport." As he emerged from the booth, alarms blared. A junior officer rushed in, panic in his eyes. "Governor, prison riot in progress. It's Kaid. He's rallying the inmates." Carl sprinted down corridors, security teams falling in behind him. They reached the prison's control room, screens showing chaos in the cell blocks. Kaid's voice rang out over the comms, inciting violence. "Cut the feeds," Carl ordered. "Lock down all sections." For hours, they fought to contain the uprising. When the dust settled, Carl stood before Kaid's cell, the Suliban leader glaring defiantly. "You can't hold us forever," Kaid spat. "Our people will never accept alien rule." Carl leaned in close. "This isn't about rule. It's about giving your people a chance at real freedom. Don't make me take more drastic measures." As Carl left the prison, his comm chirped. "Sir," a breathless aide reported, "we're picking up massive energy signatures. The Vorticai fleet just entered the system." Carl's blood ran cold. He rushed to the command center, watching as ominous red dots appeared on the tactical display. The Vorticai ships took up positions around Suliban Prime, weapons charged. "Open a channel," Carl ordered, steeling himself for the confrontation to come. The future of the galaxy now rested on his next moves. Carl's fingers danced across the holographic display, red warning indicators flashing as reports of Vorticai incursions flooded in. He turned to his assembled council, their alien features taut with concern. "They're testing us," Carl said, voice low, "probing for weaknesses." Zara's crystalline form pulsed with agitation. "We must respond swiftly before they—" The room shook as an explosion rocked the building. Alarms blared. "Report," Carl barked into his comm. "Sir, Vorticai forces have seized control of the Thalaxian system," a frantic voice replied. "They've established a beachhead and are demanding control of all resource extraction facilities." Carl's eyes hardened. He activated a secure channel to Earth. "Admiral Chen, I need every available ship. The Vorticai have made their move." For days, Carl and his council attempted negotiations. The Vorticai ambassador, a hulking figure with iridescent scales, sneered at their offers. "You are weak," the ambassador hissed. "The Suliban were but the first to fall. We will take what is ours." Carl leaned forward, eyes hard. "You've made a grave miscalculation." In the war room, Carl laid out his plan to a group of elite soldiers, human, Cronin, Arcturian, and more. "We go in quiet," he said, pointing to a schematic of the occupied Thalaxian system. "While their eyes are on our fleet, we infiltrate and dismantle their operation from within." A grizzled Zagarian nodded approvingly. "Just like old times, eh, Thompson?" As they prepared to depart, alarms blared once more. Carl's comm crackled to life. "Governor, multiple attacks across the capital. It's Vrachis. He's rallied the Suliban loyalists." Carl cursed, mind racing. He turned to his alien commanders. "Change of plans. I need you here to put down this rebellion. Can you handle it?" The Cronin general thumped his chest. "We'll crush these upstarts. Go, deal with the Vorticai." Carl's strike team slipped into the Thalaxian system aboard a cloaked shuttle. They moved swiftly, disabling comm arrays and sabotaging power generators. Vorticai patrols fell silently to precision shots and ambushes. In the command center, Carl and his team worked furiously to slice through Vorticai encryption. Alarms blared as their presence was finally detected. "We're out of time," Carl shouted. "Rig it to blow." They fought their way back to the shuttle, pursued by waves of Vorticai soldiers. As they lifted off, the occupied facilities erupted in a series of explosions. Carl's comm chirped. "Governor, we've cornered Vrachis. The rebellion is crumbling." Relief washed over Carl, but he knew the fight was just getting started. The Vorticai threat remained, and the future of the entire sector hung in the balance. Carl Thompson's eyes scanned the tactical display, a sea of red dots representing the Zaraxian armada. The command center buzzed with frantic activity as reports of devastation poured in from the outer colonies. "Sir, we've lost contact with Outpost Sigma," a young officer reported, her voice trembling. Carl's heart made. "Reroute evacuation transports to the nearby systems. We need to save as many as we can." The door slid open, and Admiral Chen strode in, his uniform singed and torn. "Thompson, it's worse than we thought. The Zaraxians breached our forward defenses like they weren't even there." Before Carl could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Security feeds showed chaos erupting in the detention block. Keed, the Suliban leader they'd worked so hard to capture, was free and rallying his loyalists. "Damn it!" Carl smacked his fist on the console. "We don't have time for this. Chen, lock down the facility. I'm heading to the war room." Carl sprinted through the corridors, dodging panicked personnel. In the war room, he found his most trusted commanders, human, Cronin, Arcturian, and more, already gathered. "We're facing a two-front war now," Carl said, activating a holographic display of the sector. "The Zaraxians are pressing their advantage, and Keeds escaped to join them." Zara, the Arcturian advisor, flickered with concern. "Our forces are spread too thin. We cannot hold them back on all fronts." "Then we don't," Carl replied, his mind racing. "We need a two-pronged strategy. First, we fortify key positions to protect the Suliban homeworld and colonies. The Zygarians owe us. They'll lead that defense." Grix, the Cronin veteran, nodded approvingly. And the second prong? Carl's eyes hardened. We take the fight to them, a strike force to hit their command ship, cut off the head, and the body will fall. As the council debated logistics, Carl assembled his team. The best of the best, humans, aliens, each chosen for their unique skills. In the hangar bay, he addressed them. This mission is our only shot at turning the tide, Carl said, his voice carrying over the whine of warming engines. We find their flagship, we board it, and we end this. They launched under the cover of a fierce battle raging in a nearby system. Carl's strike force darted between debris fields and weapon fire, their stealth systems straining to keep them hidden. For days they harried the Zeraxian fleet, hit-and-run attacks, surgical strikes on supply lines, anything to draw out their command ship. Finally, they got lucky. There, Carl pointed to a massive vessel on their scanners. That's their flagship. All ships, prepare for boarding action. They struck hard and fast, breaching the Zeraxian defenses before they could respond. Carl led the charge, his plasma rifle spitting death as they fought their way through alien corridors. Level by level, they pushed towards the bridge. Zeraxian soldiers fell before their advance, but the cost was high. Carl saw good men and women cut down, their sacrifice driving him forward. Finally, they reached the command deck. The doors slid open, revealing a sight that made Carl's blood boil. Keed stood beside the Zeraxian commander, a smug grin on his face. Thompson, Cade sneered. Still fighting other people's wars, I see. Carl raised his weapon. This ends now, Cade. Both of you surrender. The Zeraxian commander laughed, a harsh, grating sound. You're too late, human. Behold the instrument of your destruction. A massive view screen flickered to life, showing a colossal energy weapon powering up, its target clear, the Suliban homeworld. Carl's mind raced. He could take out Keed now, end the threat of the Suliban resurgence once and for all. But millions of lives hung in the balance. With a snarl of frustration, Carl spun away from Keed. Team, disable that weapon, now! They sprang into action, fingers flying over alien consoles. Carl provided covering fire as Zeraxian reinforcements poured onto the bridge. Alarms blared as the planet killer reached full power. Carl watched the energy readouts climb higher and higher, his heart pounding in his chest. Come on, he muttered. At the last possible second, the readouts flatlined. The view screen showed the massive weapon powering down, its threat neutralized. Carl allowed himself a moment of relief before the ship rocked violently. Through the viewports, he saw a massive allied fleet engaging the Zeraxians. This isn't over, Carl growled, turning back to face Kaid and the Zeraxian commander. The final battle for the fate of the stars was about to begin. The ship rocked violently as another explosion tore through space nearby. Carl Thompson's head slammed against the bulkhead, his vision blurring. He tasted blood in his mouth as he fought to stay conscious. When his eyes finally focused, Carl found himself surrounded by twisted metal and sparking wires. The bridge of his ship lay in ruins, bodies of his fallen comrades strewn about. He tried to stand, but a sharp pain in his leg sent him crashing back down. Status report, he croaked, but only static answered. Carl dragged himself to a flickering console, fingers dancing across the controls. Life support was failing, power levels critical. He glanced out the viewport, seeing nothing but debris and the fading glow of weapons fire. For days, Carl worked tirelessly. He sealed hull breaches with emergency patches, rerouted power from non-essential systems, and jerry-rigged a makeshift distress beacon. His hands bled from the constant work, but he pressed on. On the fourth day, as Carl was elbow-deep in a tangle of wires, a faint beep caught his attention. He scrambled to the communications array, heart pounding. This is transport vessel AX-279, a panicked voice crackled through. We're under attack by Zeraxian forces. Any allied ships, please respond. Carl's mind raced. He was in no shape for a rescue mission, but he couldn't abandon fellow humans to the Zeraxians. With gritted teeth, he fired up the engines. The ship groaned in protest as he pushed it to its limits, following the distress signal. He found the Zeraxian convoy, 3 sleek warships surrounding a battered transport. Carl's fingers flew across the tactical display, plotting an approach vector that used the debris field for cover. "Here goes nothing," he muttered, engaging the stealth systems. Carl's ship glided silently towards the nearest Zeraxian vessel. He docked with practiced precision, overriding the airlock controls. The moment the doors hissed open, Carl was in motion. He moved swiftly through alien corridors, his plasma rifle at the ready. 2 Zeraxian guards rounded a corner, and Carl dropped them before they could raise the alarm. He reached the prison block, finding a group of haggard humans huddled in cells. "I'm getting you out of here," Carl said, working to disable the force fields. As the prisoners stumbled out, one of them spoke up. "We're scientists. We've seen their weapon schematics. If we can get that data to the Alliance—" Carl nodded grimly. "Then let's not waste any time." They fought their way back to Carl's ship, the rescued prisoners providing covering fire with scavenged Zeraxian weapons. As they lifted off, alarms blared throughout the enemy vessel. "Hold on!" Carl shouted as he punched the engines to full power. The Zeraxian ships gave chase, energy beams lancing out around them. Carl's hands flew across the controls, executing maneuvers that pushed the battered ship to its limits. They plunged into a dense asteroid field, jagged rocks filling the viewport. Carl weaved between the obstacles, using them as cover from Zeraxian fire. A spatial anomaly loomed ahead, a swirling vortex of energy that made the sensors go haywire. Carl set course directly for it. "Are you insane?" one of the scientists yelled. "Probably," Carl replied, gritting his teeth as they plunged into the maelstrom. For heart-stopping moments, the ship tumbled through chaos. When they emerged on the other side, the Zeraxians were nowhere to be seen. Carl allowed himself a moment of relief before plotting a course for the Allied lines. As they approached, he saw the impressive array of Zagarian warships forming a defensive wall. "Unidentified vessel, state your intentions," a gruff voice demanded over the comms. "This is Carl Thompson," he responded. "I've got some friends here who might be able to help us win this war." As they docked with the Zagarian flagship, Carl saw the faces of his alien allies light up with renewed hope. He turned to the rescued scientists, their eyes shining with grit. "Let's get to work," Carl said, leading them towards the war room. The tide was about to turn. Carl Thompson leaned over the holographic display, his eyes scanning the intricate schematics of the Zeraxian command ship. The rescued scientists huddled around him, their faces gaunt but eyes bright with purpose. "There," one of them said, pointing to a pulsing node in the ship's core. "That's the weak point in their weapon systems. If we can upload a virus there, we'll cripple their entire fleet." Carl nodded, his mind racing. "We'll need a specialized team, the best of the best." Over the next few hours, Carl assembled his strike force. Zara, the Arcturian hacker whose tentacles could interface with any system. Grix, the Cronan warrior whose stone-like skin could withstand heavy fire. And Lyra, a human engineer with an uncanny ability to MacGyver solutions on the fly. As they prepared, alarms blared throughout the Allied fleet. The Zeraxians had launched a massive assault on the Zygarian defensive line. Carl watched from the bridge as the battle unfolded. Zygarian ships, sleek and deadly, darted between lumbering Zeraxian cruisers. Human fighters provided cover, their nimble maneuvers confounding the enemy. But the cost was steep. Carl saw Allied ships torn apart by Zeraxian energy weapons, their crews scattered to the void. The Zagarian line held, but barely. "We're out of time," Carl growled. "We move now." Their stealth shuttle slipped past the raging battle, using the chaos as cover. Carl's hands tightened on the controls as they approached the massive Zeraxian command ship. They docked undetected, and Carl led his team through the airlock. The corridors were a maze of alien technology, pulsing with an eerie blue light. Suddenly, a squad of Zeraxian soldiers rounded the corner. Carl dropped to one knee, his plasma rifle spitting death. Grix charged forward, Zaraxian energy beams dissipating harmlessly against his rocky hide. They fought their way deeper into the ship, leaving a trail of disabled Zaraxians in their wake. Carl's breath came in ragged gasps as they neared the central computer core. As they turned the final corner, Carl froze. There, standing before the core's entrance, was Kaid. The Suliban trader's lips curled into a sneer. "Thompson," Kaid spat, "always the hero." Before Carl could respond, a horde of Suliban loyalists poured from hidden alcoves. The corridor erupted into chaos as three factions clashed in a desperate melee. Carl ducked under a Suliban's wild swing, driving his fist into the alien's midsection. He spun, firing his rifle one-handed, dropping two Zaraxians who were bearing down on Zara. "The core!" Carl shouted over the din. "Go!" Zara and Lyra sprinted for the entrance while Carl and Grix provided cover. They vanished inside just as Kaid slammed his hand on a control panel. Blast doors began to slide shut. Carl dove through the narrowing gap, leaving Grix to hold off the enemy. The Cronin's booming laugh was the last thing Carl heard before the doors sealed. Inside the core, Zara's tentacles were a blur as she interfaced with the alien systems. Lyra worked furiously to bypass security protocols. A deep rumble shook the ship. Carl's blood ran cold as he realized what was happening. "Self-destruct sequence initiated," an emotionless alien voice announced. Carl looked at his team, saw the understanding in their eyes. There was no time to escape. It was finish the mission or die trying. "Keep working," Carl ordered. He turned to the sealed doors, rifle raised. "I'll buy you every second I can."
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.